Good evening and welcome to I guess, special edition of the Saints Insider podcast. This is some live reaction to the Saints roster cuts and a 53-man roster. Zach Ewing here with Jeff Duncan. Our other guys are running around chasing stories still, writing stuff for the morning paper and for NOLA.com tonight. But lots of good stuff up there already and lots to talk about, Jeff. This was, we talked yesterday, you, me, and Rod Walker, about how we were pretty on board with what was going to happen with this 53-man roster. There was only a couple things that we disagreed on, but we got some surprises today.
Yeah, 100%. Rod and I were just talking right before I left Saints camp that this was really a reflection a little bit, I think, of Dennis Allen putting his stamp on the team, maybe more than we even thought. I thought DA's a little more conservative guy. He's going to go with the veterans, and that's not the case at all. He went with two young, unproven, undrafted free agents, specialists, and Lou Hedley as the punter and Blake Grupe as the kicker. I didn't expect really either one of those to happen. I was not surprised that they were able to make a trade and keep Grupe. We've talked about that, so that wasn't necessarily a shocker at all. But then the big one that really surprised me, Zach, was that they went with Allante Taylor as basically the slot DB, the slot corner, the nickelback, as opposed to Bradley Roby, releasing Bradley Roby. Once I saw that information leaking out this morning that they were fielding trade calls, that did raise a red flag that he may be vulnerable, and certainly they moved on from him. So they got a lot younger at a lot of different positions today.
Yeah, that's one overarching theme that you tweeted out. The Saints' average age went down more than a year, which when you're talking about an average of 53 guys, a full year, 1.2 years, I think it is, that's a big difference. And so this is now no longer, far and away the oldest roster in the NFL. And look, the starting lineup's still fairly advanced in age, but it is kind of a concerted effort to make it younger. And like you said, Dennis Allen now able to put his stamp on this team. Does that go along with this newfound confidence we've seen in DA? I mean, it just seems like he's ready to go his own way and say, I know best, and we're going to go forward with my way.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's more comfortable in his own skin. And I also think he knows he's got the support of management and ownership. And I think that goes a long way when you make these decisions like this. I know it's always a collaborative effort with the Saints. There's no one person making these calls. It's usually kind of done in unison with the front office and the coaching staff. But in talking to some people around the organization, in the organization today, the two specialists in particular, those decisions were made because Lou Hedley and Blake Grupe beat out the other guys. In other words, it wasn't made because they could get a value in a trade for Will Lutz or because of salary cap considerations. They basically, in their evaluations of the daily evaluations, the charting of the kicking and punting competitions, these guys outperformed their senior competition. And so they went with the guys that they felt were the best players. And that goes a long way in the building when you know that the guys that just performance is actually what the decision's about, not some kind of politics.
I know Luke Johnson did report that the Bradley Roby decision was at least in part salary tied. And Matthew has a good question here on Facebook saying, I would love to know what they saw out of Taylor in the slot. I mean, he played full time for half the season last year on the outside and played very well. The Saints pass defense didn't drop off a whole lot without Marshawn Lattimore. Having said that, I listened to Allante Taylor last week doing some post-practice interviews saying, he's such a perfectionist and he'll make one good play on the outside. And then he himself is saying, and then I'll make a mistake on the, when I'm playing nickelback, and that's all I can think about. And I'm trying to give myself the grace not to beat myself up. But he was clearly going through that growth process in the slot. So, you mentioned that one. Do we think it is Allante Taylor will be the guy at nickelback?
Yeah, 100%. There's no doubt. I mean, look, he's a great athlete. I think they feel like they're not making this decision for what's the best 53 for week one. They're making it for who's going to be the best 53 by the end of December when they get in hopefully the playoff chase and down the road. There's going to be growing pains. There's no doubt. But Allante Taylor is a fantastic athlete. He's certainly, I think, a guy that upgrades their athleticism on defense over Bradley Roby. But there's going to be some days where he struggles. There's no doubt. But I think they feel like they'll work through those. They got enough talent around him to bring him along. And we got to remember also, I know everyone keeps talking about Allante Taylor and his tape in the preseason games. There's a lot more that goes into the evaluation than 3 preseason games. I mean, they see 25 practices now, and they've seen him in the slot in those practices. And that far and away is what they're basing this evaluation on, and a projection beyond where he's at now, looking at him, what's he going to be like in week 7, 8, 9 on down the road.
I think the other thing, Dunk, that people need to remember is that this is the initial 53-man roster. It's not going to be the 53-man roster even on opening day. Like, things will change. We think there'll be a Marcus May suspension at some point for his DUI from a couple of years ago. They'll have to replace him. There'll be guys placed on IR, and they'll have to be replaced. So, a guy that Jaylon Smith cut, we think he's a candidate to come back. And that's sort of the nuance of this, is if a guy is more than a 4-year veteran, he doesn't have to go through the waiver process. It's easier for the Saints to go to him and say, look, we're going to cut you on Tuesday, but we have a contract waiting for you as soon as we clear a couple of roster spots. Is that how you see it, specifically with Jaylon Smith and maybe some other guys?
Yeah, I think there's probably some kind of agreement between them. Now, you never know, right? I mean, another team, you are leaving it up to, kind of a good faith conversation. There's another factor there, and that is that veterans like Jaylon Smith, if they're on the roster in week 1, their contract is guaranteed for the rest of the year. So there's always the possibility that they try and get him on the practice squad and then activate him to the active roster in week 2. That way they're not tied to him contractually, and it can be more of a week-to-week thing. That could be another avenue. There's lots of different ways they could go with this, but you're right. There's going to be some movement. This roster is going to change in the next 48 hours or so. And look, it could change beyond that. I had someone tell me today that they may be trying out punters in week 1, week 2. So Lou Headley might not be the sure thing that we think he is right now. He's certainly going to get the first crack, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be the long-term punter here.
So main takeaways, the Saints will get younger. The Saints are not afraid to kind of go their own way. I mean, the Sean Payton days are over. I think we've seen that. They've jettisoned a couple of guys who were Payton's guys in both Adam Troutman back in the spring, and now with Will Lutz. And so this is Dennis Allen's team. It's Derek Carr's team. Mickey Loomis seems okay with that. What else do you take away from today and what was a pretty surprising day?
Well, look, I think this team feels really good about itself. I think that they make these moves because they feel confident in where they're going and how good they are, especially in their starting 22. And we talked earlier about Dennis Allen feeling more comfortable, more confident. I don't think you make these moves and go with unproven commodities. It's such an important position, like a kicker, if you don't feel like you've got the backing of ownership and management. And so I think that speaks to where he feels like he's at right now in his standing with the team, because we know this is a big year, right? I mean, you come off a 7-10 season. It's not what anybody wanted. There's a lot of questions about where this organization's going. And look, our theme of our special sections, right? It's going to be tipping point. So something of a tipping point season for Dennis Allen and a lot of people in the organization. And I think today's moves show just how confident he is where this team is at right now overall.
Yeah, we're not dealing with a team here that cares too much what outsiders think, and the proof has to be in the pudding. They've got to show the results. And look, they've opened themselves up for some criticism. If Blake Grupe misses a big kick and they lose a close game in those first 3 or 4 weeks, you're absolutely going to hear about that.
Oh, what do you think is going to happen if Will Lutz makes the Pro Bowl this year and they're going through the revolving door kicker? I mean, it'll be unrelenting, and that's part of the business. That's how it works here. There's no doubt about it. Look, they were able to pick up a late draft pick for Will Lutz. I think that certainly was a bonus. But I think this decision is one that we're going to be evaluating throughout the year, because I think this team's going to be in a lot of close games. We know their defense is very good. They played a lot. I think they played 11 one-score games last year. So they're liable to have to rely on Blake Grupe to win a lot of close games. He's going to have to come through.
Yeah, one more note I wanted to make: all three quarterbacks make the active roster. That was not unexpected because of the new rule in the NFL that you can carry a third quarterback, make him inactive on game day, but he can come in and be made active in an emergency if the first two guys get injured. So that's why Jake Hayner's on the starting roster. And then the other thing, they got a 7th round draft pick for Will Lutz. No big deal. I mean, the Saints have continued to draft well. You can nitpick here and there about, Peyton Turner's been hurt. Okay. But all 7 of their draft picks from the spring made the active roster as well, Jeff.
Yeah, and 2 undrafted rookies. So you have 9 rookies on the roster. I was telling Luke and Rod today, we need to look that up. That's probably the most they've had in a while. And that helps that average age come down, obviously, even though the Lou Headley outlier, he's a 30-year-old rookie. That you don't see that very often. But no, I think you make great points. And one other note, this isn't really cut related, but you mentioned Jameis Winston. I mean, he wasn't at practice today, and Dennis Allen said he had a wrist injury. So that means he's probably out somewhere getting evaluated. That's something we got to watch. Now we know they've got Jake Hayner and obviously Taysom Hill, but the fact that he was out with a wrist injury, he said he injured it in the game the other night, was not at practice. So something to monitor.
Yeah, certainly concerning because, Jake Hayner, as high as everyone has been on him, I don't think is the guy you want as a primary backup in week 1 if something should happen to Derek Carr. So appreciate everybody stopping by tonight. It's just a kind of a quick emergency podcast, but definitely a day of news that made it worth it. We will be back with a full episode of the Saints Insider podcast on Friday afternoon. You can subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel, get notifications for when that post is live, and we will also put it up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So, Jeff, busy week ahead, and we're counting down now.
Yeah, can't wait to get to that week 1 game. And look, I think we're going to have a lot more news, like we said, in the days and even in the next week as they get this roster ready for the Titans. I know they're already breaking down Titans work today in the building, starting that game plan. So it's going to be fun to see how this team progresses this season.
So keep it locked to NOLA.com and the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel for more Saints Insider podcasts. And for our Tipping Point season preview, starts Thursday. Luke's working on just a great story on Derek Carr. That's going to kick things off, and we'll have a story every weekday leading up to the season, something that has to do with that theme of this is really a make or break year for the New Orleans Saints. So we will have the best coverage anywhere around. That's Jeff Duncan. I'm Zach Ewing, and we will see you next time on the Saints Insider.